What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I am so happy to be talking about one of my favorite franchises of all time coming back to Netflix, and that film is called Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Fowl. Directed by Nick Park and Merlin Crossingham, this film is also written by Nick Park and Mark Burton and stars people like Ben Whitehead, Reese Schmearsmith, Peter Kay, and many more. And before we get too far into this video, I'd like to say a big thanks to all of you guys for clicking on this video, taking your time out of your day to listen to one of my reviews. If you're a returning visitor, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. But if you're new to the channel, I would like to implore you to hit that subscribe button where you can always hope to have reliable early movie and TV show reviews here on the channel, as well as a mix of things like retrospective reviews, live streams, and the occasional vlog. And today we're going to be talking about the newest Wallace and Gromit film that I believe airs sometime in December in limited theatrical release, and we'll be getting, I believe, an earlier release in the UK, but actually doesn't hit Netflix here in the States until the early part of January. So the kind folks over at Netflix sent me over an early screener to check this out, and I haven't talked about Wallace and Gromit on this channel enough, but I covered the last movie, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, as one of the first movies I ever reviewed here on the channel, back when I was reviewing movies in my car. Wallace and Gromit is one of my favorite things of all time. As a kid, it was one of my first introductions to things like Claymation, and it completely grew this love I had for these just weird, silly shorts. I absolutely loved Wallace and Gromit as a kid, and so knowing that there was a new movie coming out, directed by Nick Park, who also did A Curse of the Were-Rabbit, I was incredibly excited. Now, one thing I was going into this a little bit sad about, though, was the fact that the original voice actor of Wallace, Peter Sallis, unfortunately did pass away. This time around, the character of Wallace being taken over by Ben Whitehead, who was indeed in Curse of the Were-Rabbit, but as a different character. So going into this, I was a little sad to know that we weren't going to have Peter Sallis, but I was excited to see a new installment in this franchise that just took me back to my childhood. When I think of Wallace and Gromit, I think of watching the shorts on TV as a kid and my grandma giving me some sort of meal that had corned beef hash in this little window of time where I was absolutely obsessed with corned beef hash. It's just something I will always think about when I think about Wallace and Gromit. And so before we get into my thoughts on the film, let's get into what this one is all about. Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Fowl, of course, takes us back into the world of Wallace and Gromit, where we find that Gromit is struggling with the fact that Wallace seems to be consistently too connected to his inventions. This is when Wallace ends up creating a little gnome robot character known as Norbot, who kind of serves as this film's version of Hutch from the last movie that they made, where he's this fun little quirky, weird side character, but he's this AI operated little gnome character who's meant to do everything he can around the house. Wallace ends up using him to kind of make some money around town from people who need this Norbot character to try to fix things around their house or clean things. And Gromit is struggling with this because he feels like he's been replaced. It's become more of a Wallace and Norbot thing than it is a Wallace and Gromit thing. And more than anything, Gromit finds himself missing the old days, the simplicity of what life used to be, and the fact that automation is taking over everything. Now, of course, this is something that we're actually seeing in real life, as most people are really afraid of things like AI taking over, automation taking people's jobs. There's a lot of people who are embracing it, and there's a lot of people who are pushing back on it. And so I think this film definitely has some real life criticisms or commentary that definitely this film is touching on. Overall, I think when it comes down to what you come to a Wallace and Gromit film for, that charm, that silliness, that goofiness, that beautiful claymation animation, it's all present here. I think that Aardman does an incredible job with the animation in this film once again. I think Nick Park came back to bring that tone back. Hearing the classic Wallace and Gromit's theme song throughout the course of the film just took me back to being a kid and put a smile on my face. Overall, I thought it was very well animated. It was funny, it made me laugh, it was charming at times, and ultimately just took me back to what it was to be a Wallace and Gromit fan and put a smile on my face. Now, one thing that's interesting about this film too is that as a longtime fan, I was nice to see the connections to an old 1993 short known as The Wrong Trousers, which featured a villain known as Feathers McGraw, a jewel thief who is a penguin who wears a glove on his head to pretend that he is a chicken. And so this movie actually starts off with a bit of a connection to that short from 1993, where we see that Wallace and Gromit were the reason that he was caught and put in prison, which is essentially just the zoo. And so all these years later, Feathers McGraw is returning for his vengeance most foul, as he is trying to find a way that he can utilize this Norbot gnome to try to ruin Wallace and Gromit's life and get out of the zoo that he's captured in. And that's the base idea and premise of this film. As I already mentioned, I think when it comes down to the animation, Aardman is always on top of it. I think this film showcases exactly why they're a popular name in the world of stop motion animation. They still have that overall feel and look and vibe to their film. The overall cheeky charm of the film is still very present. That goofiness is still present, and in a lot of ways it feels like exactly like it used to be. It doesn't feel like they tried to update the feeling of the franchise too much for a new audience, more so that this feels like something for people who grew up with Wallace and Gromit, and it's probably a good way for people to get a new modern take on Wallace and Gromit without it feeling like it's detached from where the franchise originally came from. And so yeah, I thought that the film overall was well made. I mentioned before that Peter Sallis does not play Wallace, but the actor who does play him, Ben Whitehead, I do think does a great job here. He puts the voice on very, very well. He sounds just like Peter Sallis as the character, which allowed this film to feel like a genuine connection to the rest of the films without it feeling like the voice actor was too different. Of course, with Gromit not having a voice, it makes it super easy for Gromit to feel like he has always felt, and so that camaraderie between the two characters I completely loved throughout the course of the film. But one thing to know about this film going in is that this is far more of a Gromit film than it is a Wallace film. Wallace is present and has some key moments in the film, but there is a lot of segments in this film that have to do more with Gromit trying to figure things out under the surface, as Wallace is kind of oblivious to the disaster that he's kind of helped unfold. And with all that said, I think the best way I can describe my feelings on this film is that I feel exactly as I feel about the last Aardman film that hit Netflix, which was the second Chicken Run film. A film that I thought was cute and a good time. It felt like a nice throwback to the original Chicken Run. It was nice to see those characters return, even though a lot of them are played by different actors. It was nice to see that story continue on, and overall I had a good time with that movie, but I didn't think it was as good as the original Chicken Run. I thought that it kind of lacked the exact same charm and story that made the last one really good. And I feel the same way about this film. While I think Vengeance Most Foul is a great installment into the world of Wallace and Gromit, and I had a great time watching it, I do think it lacked a little something narratively, especially when you look at the last film that came out in this franchise, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. I think that that's a great film that has everything you'd want to see from the shorts. It has that cheesy nature to it, but it also has a good story, and I think it did a great job of balancing both Wallace and Gromit in that film, especially their time together. And I think that this film just lacked a little bit of the Wallace and Gromit and had far more of the Gromit, and I don't mind that because I do think this film is entertaining and it had a smile on my face the entire time watching it, but I do think it was missing a little bit of something in the charm of it overall that was able to make it as impactful as the original stuff. Now, it could just be that I'm a lot older now, and there are going to probably be people who watch this film and maybe enjoy it a little bit more than me, but ultimately I do want to make sure that I make it clear that I did find this to be a good time. As a longtime Wallace and Gromit fan, I really enjoyed it, but as somebody who tries to be critical of things here and try to, you know, recognize that some people might feel a little bit more negatively about something, the one thing that I did have a gripe with was the story. I just felt like it felt a little bit overly generic, and it was one of those movies that we got to the third act and it felt like it came so quickly and there just wasn't as much meat on the bone. But that's by no means to say that there isn't meat on the bone at all. I found it to be a good time. It put a smile on my face, as I've already said several times here, and I think it's a film that's definitely worth your time if you're a Wallace and Gromit fan, and I think it could be a good fun introduction piece for people who maybe check this movie out for the first time and take the trip backwards and try to watch the rest of the Wallace and Gromit stuff. It was a nice connective tissue to the original shorts from back in the day, while also being a new fun installment. And so yeah, I think Aardman's done it once again. I hope we continue to get more Wallace and Gromit stuff, and a big thanks to all of you guys for taking your time to watch this review. And I'll end this review really quickly by saying that I now have merch on the channel. In the description box, you guys can find a link to my Spring store, Teespring store, as well as TeePublic. I've heard that TeePublic has the better printing options in terms of the quality of prints, so I would recommend going to TeePublic, but I do have Spring as the one that's linked here to the channel. So if you guys would like to support the channel in some way, shape, or form, definitely go ahead and buy one of those pieces of merch. But if you don't, that's totally okay too. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Hit that like button. What are your thoughts on Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul? Are you planning to check it out? Or if you're watching this after the film is released, did you like it? Did you not like it? Whatever the case may be, I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.